Today we going to watch the game that has most book moves include 18 book moves.
This is Ruy López opening, martial attack, modern, main line, Spassky variation. e4. Opening with the king's pawn controls the center and opens up the light-squared bishop and queen, often leading to sharp games. e5 is a common response that establishes a presence in the center, controls d4, and opens up the queen and dark-squared bishop. King f3 develops the knight toward the center, attacks the e5 pawn, and prepares to castle. Knight c6 develops the knight toward the center, protects the pawn on e5, and eyes the d4 square. The Ruy López opening develops the bishop to immediately attack the knight on c6, the lone defender of the e5 pawn. a6 forces the bishop to decide, exchange or retreat. ba4 safely retreats the bishop while keeping pressure on the knight. Knight f6 attacks the undefended e4 pawn and develops the knight at the same time. Castling gets the king out of the center and prepares to develop the rook to e1. Bishop e7 develops the dark-squared bishop and prepares to castle. Rook e1 centralizes the rook and protects the e4 pawn. b5 gains space on the queen side and forces the bishop to the b3 square. Bishop b3 is forced, but the bishop is well placed because it attacks the f7 square. Castling gets the king out of the center and activates the rook. c3 prepares the d4 pawn push, opens up the c2 square for the bishop and allows the queen to develop on the queen side. d5 takes space in the center, attacks the e4 pawn and allows the light-squared bishop to develop. e-cut d5 captures the d5 pawn, attacks the knight on c6 and allows the e1 rook to attack the e5 pawn. Knight cut d5 recaptures the d5 pawn and centralizes the knight. Knight cut e5 captures the pawn and places the knight on a strong central square where it attacks the knight on c6 and the f7 pawn. Knight cut e5 captures the knight on e5 and centralizes the knight where it attacks many important squares. Rook cut e5 captures the knight on e5 and attacks the knight on d5. c6 defends the knight on d5 and allows the queen to develop on the queen side. d4 takes space in the center, supports the rook on e5 and allows the dark-squared bishop to develop. Bishop d6 attacks the rook on e5 and will attack the h2 pawn after white moves their rook. Rook e1 activates the rook on the open e-file. Queen h4 activates the queen and threatens queen cut h2 check. g3 attacks the queen and stops the threat of queen cut h2, but weakens the f3 and h3 squares in front of white's king. Queen h3 moves the attacked queen to an aggressive square. Bishop e3 develops the bishop toward the center and helps defend the king's side. Bishop g4 develops the light-squared bishop and attacks the queen. Queen d3 moves the queen to a safe square while also giving it access to the f1 square to avoid checkmate. Rook a.e.8 centralizes the rook and occupies the open e-file. Knight 2 develops the knight toward the center and closer to the king side to help on the defense of the king. Rook e6 prepares to double rooks on the e-file and controls black's third rank. a4 attacks the b5 pawn. Queen h5 is the last book move. Like, share, subscribe.